Part 1. The Cold Case. Detective Jane Mitchell had seen her fair share of gruesome murder cases, but the one that had landed on her desk that gloomy morning was different. It was an unsolved cold case that had haunted the small town of Ravenswood for decades. The victim, Emily Hawthorne, had been found brutally murdered in her own home, and the killer had never been caught. As Jane delved into the case files, she discovered that Emily's death had been shrouded in mystery from the very beginning. There had been no witnesses, no leads, and no apparent motive for the crime. The lack of evidence had frustrated the police at the time, and the case had eventually gone cold. But Jane was determined to uncover the truth, and she began by visiting Emily's old home, a decaying Victorian mansion that had been abandoned for years. The house had a reputation for being haunted, and the townsfolk whispered that Emily's restless spirit still lingered within its walls. Part 2. The Haunted House. As Jane entered the old mansion, a chill ran down her spine. The air inside was heavy with an oppressive stillness, and dust motes danced in the dim light that filtered through the cracked windows. The furniture was covered in tattered sheets, and cobwebs clung to every corner. Jane made her way through the house, her footsteps echoing in the silence. In the living room, she found an old photograph of Emily and her family. Their faces were frozen in time, but their eyes seemed to follow her as she moved. She continued her search, climbing the creaking staircase to the second floor. As she reached the top, a sudden draft blew out the candles she had brought with her, plunging the hallway into darkness. Jane fumbled for her flashlight and shone it down the corridor. That's when she heard it. A faint, mournful whisper that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. It was a name, repeated over and over. Emily, Emily. Jane's heart pounded as she followed the voice down the hallway, which grew colder with every step. It led her to a door that was slightly ajar. With trembling hands, she pushed it open. Part 3. The Unseen Presence. Inside the room, Jane's flashlight revealed a scene frozen in time. The walls were covered in faded floral wallpaper, and a dusty old crib stood in one corner. It was as if the room had been preserved exactly as it had been on the night of the murder. As Jane approached the crib, she felt a sudden drop in temperature. The air grew thick, and her breath misted in front of her. She reached out to touch the crib, and that's when she saw it. A faint, ghostly handprint on the wooden frame. Her heart raced as she realized that she was not alone in the room. An unseen presence seemed to envelop her, and she could feel a spectral gaze upon her. The whispering voice grew louder, and Jane could now make out words. "Help me. Find the truth." Jane backed away from the crib, her flashlight trembling in her hand. She knew she had stumbled onto something beyond the realm of the living. The cold case had taken a chilling turn into the paranormal. Part 4. The Haunting Investigation. Over the following weeks, Jane delved deeper into the mystery of Emily Hawthorne's murder. She consulted psychics and paranormal investigators, all of whom confirmed the presence of a restless spirit within the old mansion. The investigators spoke of malevolent forces at work, and they warned Jane not to meddle further. But Jane couldn't turn back now. She was driven by a determination to bring Emily's killer to justice, even if it meant confronting the supernatural. She decided to hold a séance in the haunted house, hoping to communicate with Emily's spirit and uncover the truth. As the séance began, the room grew colder, and the candles flickered ominously. Jane and the other participants held hands and called out to Emily's spirit. At first, there was only silence, but then a voice spoke through one of the participants, a voice that was not their own. It was Emily herself, her voice filled with anguish and longing. She recounted the events of the night of her murder, describing a shadowy figure who had entered her room. The figure had worn a mask, and Emily had never seen their face. She had been strangled in her crib, and her life had been snuffed out before she could utter a sound. Part 5. The Unmasking. With the information from the séance, Jane was able to piece together the final moments of Emily's life. It was clear that the killer had been someone close to her, someone who had known the layout of the house and had taken advantage of the darkness and silence of the night. As Jane dug deeper into Emily's family history, she discovered a shocking revelation. Emily had a twin brother, Ethan, who had died at birth. His existence had been kept a secret, buried in the family's dark past. Jane began to suspect that Ethan's death had played a role in Emily's murder. She confronted Emily's surviving family members, and they confessed to the terrible truth. Ethan had not died at birth. He had survived, but had been hidden away in the attic, locked in solitude for his entire life. He had grown up in darkness and isolation, consumed by bitterness and hatred. Part 6. The Final Confrontation. Jane knew she had to confront the long-forgotten twin, Ethan, who had become a vengeful spirit. She made her way to the attic, where she found a room covered in dust and cobwebs. In the center stood a mirror, its glass cracked and shattered. As Jane looked into the broken mirror, the room seemed to come alive with a malevolent energy. Ethan's tormented spirit materialized before her, his face contorted with rage. He blamed Emily for his years of suffering and had returned from beyond the grave to exact his revenge. The room grew colder and objects levitated in the air. Jane knew she had to act fast. With all her strength, she reached out to the mirror and whispered Emily's name. As the mirror shattered completely, a blinding light engulfed the room, and Ethan's spirit let out a final, anguished scream before dissipating into the ether. With the malevolent force gone, Emily's spirit appeared one last time, her expression peaceful and grateful. She thanked Jane for uncovering the truth and setting her brother's tormented soul free. As Emily's spirit faded away, the old mansion seemed to sigh with relief, and the air grew warm once more. The murder case had turned into a haunting and heart-wrenching tale of family secrets, betrayal, and a restless spirit seeking justice. Detective Jane Mitchell had not only solved the cold case, but had also helped bring closure to a tragic chapter in Ravenswood's history. Please subscribe, or I will haunt you down in your dreams.